Welcome to Corwin's Teacher to Teacher podcast with host Carol Pelletier Radford. Carol is an experienced classroom teacher, university educator, founder of mentoringinaction.com, and author of 4 best-selling professional books for teachers. She believes the best form of professional learning happens when teachers engage in authentic conversations and share their wisdom. In every episode, Carol and her guests share stories about pivotal moments in their careers, successful classroom strategies, and personal actions they take to minimize stress and stay healthy. The Teacher to Teacher podcast is a place to engage in authentic conversation and reflection with experienced educators. We hope these conversations will energize you, keep you inspired, and remind you why you chose to become a teacher.
Hello, welcome to the Teacher to Teacher podcast, Sharing Our Wisdom, with our host, Carol Radford. I am Tori Bachman, a Corwin editor and co-producer of this podcast, which we've created for teachers at all levels who are searching for practical wisdom they can use in their classrooms. We believe we're all constantly learning, and we're learning together. I am excited to introduce today's guests, 2 dynamic and wise educators who are here with Carol to share some wisdom. We have today Rebecca Harper joining us and Cassie Tabrizi. I'll introduce them both to you now. Rebecca Harper is a professor of literacy at Augusta University in Georgia. She has served as an invited speaker and keynote for a variety of literacy conferences and has delivered literacy professional development sessions across the country. Rebecca's research interests include sociocultural theory and critical literacy, and content and disciplinary literacy. Rebecca is also a Corwin author with 2 books published and a 3rd coming in the fall of 2024. Her most recent title, Writing Workouts, Strategies to Build Students' Writing Skills, Stamina, and Success, was published in 2023 and is well on its way to being a bestseller. Hi, Rebecca. Welcome to Teacher to Teacher.
Hey, Tori. Thanks for having me here.
Harper.
And Cassie Tabrizi is the owner and founder of createabilities.com, a curriculum and instructional design company. Cassie hosts her own podcast, After the Bell. She is passionate about bringing classroom ideas and resources to life for elementary educators everywhere. While teaching 3rd grade at a Title I elementary school, Cassie earned her English as a second language endorsement and her master's degree in curriculum and instructional design. These gave her the background and skills needed to create materials that are differentiated, engaging, and meaningful. Cassie is also one of the educators who's featured in Carol's recent book, titled When I Started Teaching, I Wish I Had Known, Weekly Wisdom for Beginning Teachers. Hey, Cassie, thanks for making time to talk with us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And we've all been really looking forward to this conversation, and I am going to now turn it over to Carol.
Thank you, Tori, and welcome to both of you, Cassie and Rebecca. So what I love about the Teacher to Teacher is that we bring forward wisdom from either former teachers, as in this case with this episode, or current classroom teachers to share to improve our classroom strategies right now. So for the listeners, this is an episode that will help you to be more joyful and more effective in your own classroom. So Rebecca, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to just dive in and tell me what you're currently doing and maybe your journey into teaching. And did you always want to be a teacher? I'm always curious when I have my guests, is this your passion? Tell me what's on for you.
So right now, of course, I'm teaching here at the university, and I work with our doc students in the EDD program in educational innovation. So I spend a lot of time working with teachers and working with my students. I'm always trying to think about what ways I can get teachers to think through how they might get their students to read and write more. So that's always in front of me. I did not want to be a teacher at all. It was the last thing that I wanted to do. I come from a family of educators. My mother was a teacher. Several of my aunts are teachers, and it was never what I wanted to do. Even though when I was growing up, I would do lessons in my mother's class for my sister. It was, I didn't want to be like my mother, and then when I grew up, I realized that really was who I probably should want to be like. But it is the most natural place for me to be. because I think teaching you see impact and you get to build relationships. And I think it's one of the closest things to being on stage than actually being on stage. So I love it. It's exactly
So
where I
what
need
did
to
you
be.
want to be then instead?
Oh my gosh, I wanted to do all kinds of stuff. I wanted to be a dance teacher. And my mama told me I wasn't going to make any money doing that, even though Miss Ruthie, my dance teacher, I thought she did just fine on her own. And I wanted to be a pharmacist because I love chemistry. So all kinds of stuff, but not this at all.
Oh, so what was the moment that you shifted into making that decision to be a teacher?
Well, I went back to school. I had gone to school when I finished high school on a full scholarship. I graduated valedictorian, and then I didn't know. I got there, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then so I took a couple of years off, and then when I went back, I remember thinking like, what am I going to do? And I had always worked and tutored kids and things like that. And when I was picking out the majors, I thought, well, I could probably do this, and we'll see how it goes. And I did, and it's exactly where I am supposed to be. I've never felt as at home anywhere as much as I do that I do in the classroom.
So your moment, I think you mentioned you taught middle school for a number of years, and then you made this decision to teach at the university with doctoral students and to influence the profession in a broader way. What was there a pivotal moment that comes to mind that shifted you into writing or teaching at the university, or what happened that is some wisdom that you can share with us?
Well, I'll tell you that I didn't mean to end up here at the university either. I had a baby and I stayed home after I had Amelia, and I had been home for about 18 months and I was bored and I wanted to do something not full time. And so I applied for this adjunct position here at the university, thinking that I would, teach a class at night and get paid a couple $1,000s and that would be it. And when I came in here, they needed somebody to take over a technology class, and they needed somebody to essentially work for the rest of the semester. So they hired me as a full-time temporary instructor, and I thought I would be here for 6 months. And they hired me because I had a master's in ed tech. And but that really wasn't my passion. I just got that degree because I knew it would be marketable. So I took the job here thinking I'd be here for 6 months. I didn't even go into teachers retirement system because I thought I'm not going to be here. I did optional retirement, and then 16 years later, here I still am. So even the way I got to university was kind of on accident purpose, if that makes sense. The moment that like my teaching shifted and where I feel like that my professional pivot was at a National Writing Project Summer Institute in 2005 at the University of South Carolina. And I did a summer institute, which I did not because I really cared about writing, but because I was in a master's program and I would get 6 hours of free graduate credit. And I went to this interview and all these teachers were talking about how this was life changing and all this mess. And I was there because I needed free graduate credit. But it is the professional pivot. I had never presented anywhere ever. I had never thought about writing anything. I had never thought about any of that stuff until that summer. And so when I think about where I am today, sitting in this office talking to you all, it all goes back to that one summer in 2005.
Isn't it? I love the way you said on accident on purpose, or there is always this intervention in our lives when we look back at those moments that you made a huge decision that has changed your outlook, the way you teach, and really that you're writing books for teachers now and presenting all over the country. So I want to thank you though for your honesty about teachers needing credit and going to things, and that motivates us. When we want to learn, we do need to be acknowledged and motivated to put ourselves in these positions. And I think your story is an honest one, and I appreciate your authenticity. Our other guest, Cassie. So tell me what you're doing right now, how you're helping teachers. How did you always want to be a teacher? What did you teach? And we'll get into your pivotal moment.
Yeah, I definitely always wanted to be a teacher. I, like Rebecca, come from a family of teachers. My mom, my sisters, my aunt, my grandma was our secretary at our elementary school for 40 years. And it was just kind of in my blood. I would help in their classrooms, and I always knew I wanted to do it. I didn't know that I would enjoy what I'm doing now when I first started. I taught third grade, and I also taught a year of preschool, which bless preschool teachers, because that is definitely a job that one can have.
That's a challenging
That
job.
is a challenge. Yes. And they're cute. I prefer older students. And then when I had my daughter, I decided, I really would like to be able to stay home and make something work, but I still need an income and I still have a passion for education. So I utilized my master's in curriculum and instructional design, and I started my own curriculum instructional design business. So I design resources, I present at conferences, I train teachers through blogs and webinars. I have my own podcast called After the Bell, and it's just kind of transformed step by step into this thing that I didn't even know was a possibility.
Wow, you created it from your own need and passion merging together. So it's interesting, like Rebecca had a family of teachers, but she was definitely not going to be a teacher. And you had a family of teachers, and you were
like, yep,
going to be a teacher.
That's it.
So we're all and I have two sons that are teachers, and my husband's we're surrounded. So what's a pivotal moment for you in this journey that has made a difference to the way you support teachers or make decisions?
I was dead set on being a secondary science teacher. That's how I started college, and I was about 2.5 years into that degree when I got a job working in an after-school program for elementary kids. And that was the end of it. I knew right then that I needed to switch. Yes, I was like 2.5 years into a different degree, but I wanted to be there to support these kids and to be in the trenches in elementary and just see what I could do there. I got along with those kids. We just made a connection, and that was all she wrote.
Why do you think you chose secondary? Like, where did, a lot of pre-service teachers, I worked at a couple of universities, and they can't decide what level they want to teach. And what made you think secondary was it?
Well, the honest answer, my mom told me my whole life I would make a good secondary teacher.
Oh, there you go. See,
that was it.
Listen to other people instead of our own intuition.
Yeah.
And then you had that experience, and you're like, I'm not doing that.
And I could have done it, but I'm telling you, secondary science classes are kind of hard in college. So it was a relief.
It was a relief to find your own path and make your own decision. I love that.
And not feel dumb when I would go to college classes. Elementary ed, I was like, oh, I can do this. Organic chemistry, not so much.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about the writing influence that both of you bring. So you're a curriculum writer and sharer, and Rebecca has several books. Rebecca, back to you. Tell me a little bit about why you think, share your titles and what's coming out, and just tell me why you think these books are so important and why teachers need to pay attention to what you've written.
Well, I mean, if you look at the research, you see that most teachers have not had any professional development or any pre-service or even graduate classes that are specifically focused on writing. We typically have a lot when it comes to reading and how to teach kids how to read. If you're a middle grades or a secondary person, you do if you're an ELA person. But even if you're ELA, it's more focused on literature. So if you teach math, science, or social studies or anything else, you don't get any of it. But yet all teachers are required to teach some form of literacy. But literacy in different disciplines looks different. So the way that I read and write in math looks very different than the way that I read and write when I respond to a literary critique. So in general, just people they don't know how to do it. And it's not that they can't, it's just they haven't had the opportunity. And then the other piece too to think about is that most of the people that we have coming up into teaching right now have been raised on a scripted program. So they have these curriculum programs where, you read and, it tells you what to ask the students and what they're supposed to say. And a lot of the teachers who we have coming through pre-service programs, they didn't do a writing workshop model. They don't know what that is. And it's daunting and I think frustrating and scary for a lot of teachers. How do I do this thing? But yet we all are writers, and so we write a significant amount in our regular lives, and a lot of our students are doing the same thing too. So I'm always looking for ways in which to take what I know, what they're already doing in their personal lives, meeting my students, and using it and leveraging it for the academic standards that I have to have in my classroom. So for me, the way I see it and the way I see the world when it comes to writing, it's very simple. Like, I see it everywhere. I was watching the Super Bowl last night, and I was watching Usher's halftime show. If I were in the high school or the middle school classroom right now, I would put that on and I would say, this is a summary of his work, because it's basically a summary of the songs that he has done over the past few decades. Not all the tracks, but his high points. And even then, in some cases, things are missing, because my daughter was like, well, why didn't he include Climax? That's one of my favorite songs. That's one of his most popular songs. So when I'm watching the Super Bowl last night, I'm thinking I could use this as another way to showcase literacy in the classroom. So it's very easy for me. It comes very natural for me to do it, but I recognize that it doesn't always come natural for other teachers, just like math doesn't come naturally for me. So I'm always trying to think about what can I share that can help teachers see this is something they can use in their classroom.
Thank you for that. That's inspiring and practical. And I think our listeners are looking for practical wisdom that can be integrated into the classroom. What are the titles of your books?
So the two that I have with Corwin are Right Now and Right On. That's a content literacy book. And then the newest one that I just wrote with them is Writing Workouts, and that's more ELA focused. So when you think about literacy in math, math people don't care about voice and vivid vocabulary and characterization. They care about academic vocabulary and the succinct nature of language. But ELA people, they do care about voice and they do care about characterization. And so this newest book that I just published with Corwin focuses on those pieces that are more ELA focused.
So you've got a wide range of audiences that can benefit from this pedagogical content wisdom. I appreciate that you've dedicated your focus to this, because I think it's really important. Cassie, you're doing curriculum and content. What do you think about what Rebecca's focusing on to give to teachers?
I love it. My master's thesis was on writing. Back then we called it expository writing. Now it's informational writing, but I absolutely agree with her that we aren't prepared as educators in college to teach a robust and rigorous writing curriculum of any kind. The most you get is maybe with some type of reading program where they just like tuck it in the end. At least that's what it feels like. So I think her focus is absolutely needed, and that's great.
Well, we're going to make sure you get a copy of her books.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Use it in your work. And then we'll make sure Rebecca gets a copy of the book that you're in as well, so that we can hand off this wisdom. So writing is the basis of communication. How are you integrating writing into your business and professional learning with your teachers?
For students or just me, myself?
Oh, well, either. Yeah, for students or teachers working with the students, because you're doing a lot of PD as well.
Yeah, I like to give teachers an ample opportunity to write about what they've learned in their own words, to jot or doodle or whatever it is, to record their thoughts. I mean, I also write blog posts, I write courses. It's not quite the same as a book, but just trying to make my ideas visible and make them understandable. And a lot of my writing also is student focused. Right now I'm working on year-long math curriculums, and you would think, oh, it's math, they're just going to do the answers. But can we kind of integrate that and find ways for them to write their own story problems, or to really explain their thinking, where they're practicing some of these writing skills cross-curricularly, if that's a word, and really showing what they know. And there's so many fun ways and interesting ways that you can get students writing, whether it's about math or about themselves or about another topic. And it becomes easier to integrate than you realize once you just start and do one piece at a time.
I love that. Rebecca, can you share with us one strategy or something from your book that comes to mind that teachers have found really useful, either in the ELA or in a content area? Like, what's something from your book that we can share with our listeners today?
I mean, I think that more than anything, it's important for teachers to give their students opportunities to write every day, but it doesn't need to be this piece that goes from this conceptualization all the way to publication. Most of it, what you do is going to be pretty rough and dirty, and it's not going to look good. It's going to be sloppy. But I use Post-its a lot because I can get kids to write a whole. I can get them to write an entire literature review on using nothing but Post-its and just stick things together. And then I can also model revision really easily. Just getting them to do smaller pieces because I can take those smaller pieces and add them up and make them, longer, more involved pieces. And also, several years ago, Brod Baggart, who is a fantastic poet, he's just wonderful. He came and talked to some of my teachers here, and one of the things that he said to us has stuck with me. He said he always tells students to write their worst. Because if you think about teachers, we typically say, write your best, do your best work, try your best. And then you put an exemplar up there, and then some of the kids are like, I'm never going to be able to do that. So he always says, write your worst, because everybody can write their worst. So I can fix something that's on the paper that is a hot mess, but I can't fix and help a student who is too afraid to write because they want perfection.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's a great message because I taught fifth grade for many years, and writing, I loved writing, but you couldn't get some kids to write anything because they were so afraid to use the wrong words. I'm so glad you shared that as an option. And it's more encouraging in talking through their stories and what's in their mind and getting it down on paper. I want to hear your story though, Cassie. You submitted to the When I Started Teaching book and were selected to share some wisdom with beginning teachers or any teachers. We've had a lot of levels read this book and go, good idea. Can you share your story, what you learned during your teaching?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson that I learned was to give myself grace. And that's the title of my chapters, Give Yourself Grace. Because especially as a new teacher or even as a seasoned teacher where things are constantly being added to your plate, even after COVID, things have not gone back to normal and you're dealing with more behavior issues and just so many other things. It's easy to feel like you're drowning, like you're overwhelmed, like you can never get on top of it. And then you feel guilt because you see these teachers on social media with the Pinterest classrooms and these perfect lessons that go great. And then you look at your own room and you're like, mine doesn't look like that. My lessons didn't go like that. I'm so far behind. My kids, I feel like I haven't seen my kids as much as I should. And you start to feel shame and you start to feel guilt. And I think the biggest thing that you can remember is to just give yourself a break. You know that you're giving everything that you can give. You know that it's okay to ask for help, and you know that you're just doing the best that you can. And sometimes your students get that 100%. Sometimes your family gets that. Sometimes you have to give that to yourself, and all of that is okay. And things will keep going on and surviving, and it's all going to be okay.
Thank you for saying that. I think we give our kids breaks, just like Rebecca was talking about, write your worst. And we're always thinking about the teachers and the other people, especially the two of you who are working in professional development and helping the teachers. But we're always trying to be exceptional and the best we can be and the most effective. And I loved your message, and that's why I selected it for the book, is that we do need to step back once in a while. And it relates to my next question, which is how do we nourish ourselves? You two are leaders in the field. You're modeling for other people. And I know that when we have mentors in schools, the novice teachers will look, just kind of like Rebecca said with the student, the perfect paper, they'd look at the mentor and go, I'm never going to be able to do that. I'm still struggling with my classroom management. But we need to take time away as human beings to nourish ourselves, to reset, and we have to model that or we'll never have teachers that will stay in the profession because they won't have anything outside of teaching to keep them busy. And I know teachers work 24/7, but I'm really pushing on this podcast to dig out, to find out what are people doing to take care of themselves. So Cassie, what do you do?
It's so hard to turn the teacher brain off. Like Rebecca was saying, she was watching the Super Bowl and she was already like, how can I make this a lesson? How can I teach? Like we can't turn it off.
Right.
And like I work at home doing all of this, and I work in classrooms every week, and I'm still thinking like, oh, I should try that. What about this? And then you see social media and it's just in your face all the time. So I try and get out of the house. I try and get into nature. I live in Utah where there's beautiful mountains. So I try and go hiking and just be outside, actually see the sun. Some days I'm very pale, so I need the vitamin D.
Yes. What's your favorite hike? Where have you hiked that you love? Is there
Well, my favorite hike is actually in Canada. I went to Banff.
Oh, I just went to Banff.
Isn't it so beautiful?
Oh my God, Banff and Moraine Lake.
And Lake Louise. Yeah.
And it was magical. And we stayed in Canmore, and just being in nature does rest our minds. And I think we're afraid. I'm always afraid I'm going to forget something or forget this good idea. But I find when I'm in nature for an extended amount of time that I don't. I'm fresher, and the new idea that comes. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, Rebecca, I know that you are a workaholic and a writer and a professor, but what's your hobby, or a hobby that we should recover in you? What do you enjoy doing? Or what?
I mean, I do read. I mean, I read a lot. I watch documentaries all the time.
Okay.
But I have 3 children, and they all are competitive swimmers. My oldest has just committed to Vanderbilt, and so I spend a lot of time at the pool with them. So they keep me busy. When I work out, that is something else. But I'll tell you that for me, so much of what I do is encapsulated by the relationships that I have built with my students, and they really recharge me. So, when you love the people that you're with, and then the stuff that you have to do that's work related is just kind of extra. I don't ever feel like I'm working, to be honest with you. Except when I'm on deadline, which, and I get behind. But as far as like building those relationships with my students, they check on me, and they will send me a text and say, how are you doing? And so being able to, be with them and check in with them when they have babies and they get new jobs and all that stuff, that's just as much of a recharge for me,
right,
than any of the other stuff.
Right. Well, I think it's that delicate balance that, I don't know, we all try to dance. So one thing that I do that's kind of a weird thing is I have a hobby. I collect rocks.
Me too.
Do you? Rocks?
Yes, rocks and minerals.
Rocks and minerals. Oh, that's very cool. I'm glad that I'm not so weird. But I've been doing it for years. When I was thinking about it, I was, oh my God, 20, 30 years. And I think my first mineral, amethyst and citrine. And what are your favorite rocks and crystals? Do you have any?
Oh man, I really want some dioptase, which is like a sparkly green crystal. That one is on my to-do list. I love the blue and green ones.
So Amazonite.
Yeah. Dioptase, chrysocolla, malachite.
Malachite's very green and blue. Yes. Okay. So that's the geeky rock.
Oh yeah. Hobby. Super nerdy. Yeah.
Super nerdy.
Yeah.
And then you can make crystal grids from the rocks and make them in nature. And so just getting out of making a podcast, writing a chapter, writing a book. I know it sounds crazy, but taking some time to do something that's completely different refreshes and recharges me. Okay, Cassie, I'm going to share some of my rock crystals. Now I'm putting them in plants. So I'll show you.
Nice. Yeah, you have to send me pictures. I love that stuff.
I will. I definitely will. So as we wind down, I would like each of you to give some advice to our listeners a message to either beginning teachers, experienced teachers. What do you want to leave people with today? Cassie, what do you want to say?
Just tying into what I said before, remove the shame of setting boundaries. It's okay to protect your own mental health and physical well-being. Burnout is a real thing that's getting harder to fight off every year. And if you can set a boundary and stick to it without the guilt, you're going to be so much better off.
Thanks for that. Very wise. And Rebecca, what's your advice for our?
So when I always say this to new faculty, and then just teachers in general. So there's a great movie, The Runaway Bride, with Julia Roberts, and if you've ever seen that movie, she's been, left 4 or 5 guys at the altar, and when the reporter comes to meet her, he finds out that whoever she's dating at that time, that's how she orders her eggs. So if they eat scrambled eggs, that's how she orders them. And the next guy orders over easy and she orders them. So I always tell faculty, you have got to know how you take your eggs. So it doesn't matter who else is at the table and what they're doing. You have to know yourself well enough to know that, by George, if everybody else is doing it this way, I'm going to still be me. And so it took me a while to carve out the space and place to be able to do that. But I think once you figure that out and you know who you are, then all the other stuff, it'll just all fall into place.
I love it. Like making the choice, like Cassie, to teach elementary instead of doing what her mom said.
Yep.
And teach secondary. How do you take your eggs? I love that. That's fabulous. So Tori is going to summarize the highlights of this conversation, and then I'll close out with a favorite quote. So turn it over to Tori. What did you hear in this conversation? Lots of themes.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. I actually was really excited to be in conversation with people who consider themselves writing people, because I also consider myself a writing person. So I think it was important for us to kind of call out that piece that a lot of teachers don't really have a lot of background in writing instruction, might not feel comfortable with teaching kids how to write. But you each said some things about writing that I actually wrote down because I'm a writer. But you said, Cassie, writing is making your thinking visible, and you're writing all the time in many different ways. And it's, super practical, but also, communicating. That's really the key. And I have had the privilege of working with Rebecca on her book. So I've, really grown excited by the strategies that she puts in place for teachers, and like really making writing accessible not only for the kids but for the teachers. And I really love the ideas that Rebecca puts forth around low stakes writing, getting kids to write more often, and even getting teachers to write more often in a way that feels approachable and isn't really high pressure, I think is super important. I also just wanted to give a shout out to the National Writing Project, because I know Rebecca says that changed her career. And I know a lot of teachers who've taken part in the National Writing Project have said the same thing. So just wanted to call attention to that for our listeners. If there is an opportunity for you to be part of the National Writing Project, even if you don't really think you're a writing person, I think it could be really valuable. And really the last thing, I just want to call attention to what Cassie talked about, like giving yourself grace. And I really loved your wording, Cassie, of removing the shame of setting boundaries. Really important for teachers, probably for all of us. But also goes along with what Rebecca offered at the end, know how you take your eggs, right? Like if you can set your own boundaries and know what your strengths are, you're probably going to be happier and more successful and able to show up for your kids every day, but also show up for the other people who are important to you. So I thank you both for those little pearls of wisdom. It was really, really a nice conversation. Good to meet you and be here with you today.
Thanks, Tori. That's great. So in closing, I'm going to share a quote from one of my favorite authors. His name is Parker J. Palmer. And he wrote Courage to Teach. If you haven't read that, I think it's a wise book to look into. And he also wrote Let Your Life Speak. And the quote that I will leave you with is, good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. Good teaching comes from the identity and integrity of the teacher. And I wanted to thank both of you for sharing your identities and your integrity in this conversation today. And thank you to all our listeners for listening to Teacher to Teacher. Bye for now, until we meet again.
Thanks, everyone, for joining today's Teacher to Teacher conversation. We hope this time together energized you, inspired you, and reminded you why you chose to become a teacher. You can purchase any of Carol's books and any books mentioned in the podcast online at www.corwin.com. Please leave a review and share this podcast with your colleagues. Thank you for listening to the Corwin Teacher to Teacher podcast, a place to share teacher wisdom and engage in authentic conversations with experienced educators.
Come explore Corwin's free New Teacher Toolkit and resources. We've curated these resources based on extensive research from teachers, coaches, and principals alike. Whether you are brand new or a veteran teacher, find ready-to-go teaching tools at corwin.com today.